one of the Democrats' main targets, spoke to Garland late Monday and invited the judge to breakfast. Date and time to be decided. Spending. It's been years since Congress approved each of the annual appropriations bills that fund the budgets of agencies and departments. Instead, the new normal is an all-encompassing bill at the end of the year. Republican leaders want to get the process back on track, and the Senate Appropriations Committee is expected to start with this work during the week of April 11. In the House, GOP leaders are still trying to win approval of a broader budget plan that's usually a precursor to action on the appropriations bills. Chances are iffy at best. And finally, criminal justice. The GOP caucus is split over a bill that would give judges discretion to impose lesser sentences than federal mandatory minimums and would eliminate mandatory life sentences for three-time nonviolent drug offenders.
Thanks, Don. From Washington, the headline reads, Justices Reject Bid to Dilute Latino Urban Political Power. The Supreme Court unanimously endorsed election maps that bolster the growing political influence of America's Latinos on Monday, ruling that states can count everyone, not just eligible voters, in drawing voting districts. The decision rejected a challenge from Texas voters that also could have diluted the voting power of urban Democrats to the benefit of rural Republicans. The case offered a test of the principle of one person, one vote, the requirement laid out by the Supreme Court in 1964 that political districts be roughly equal in population. The issue here, though, was what population to consider, everyone or just eligible voters. All 50 states used total population as their basis for drawing district lines, but the challengers said the rural state Senate districts in which they lived had vastly more eligible voters than urban districts, making their votes count for less in violation of the Constitution. In Texas and other states with large immigrant populations, urban districts include many more people who are too young, not yet citizens, in the country illegally, or otherwise ineligible to vote. All of them, recorded by the census, count for the purpose of drawing political districts. Civil rights groups said that forcing states to change their method of constructing districts would have damaged Latino political influence. The Supreme Court stopped short of saying that states must use total population, and it also did not rule on whether states are free to use a different measure, as Texas had asked.
From Qaryatan, Syria. Syrian troops fired their guns at celebration amid smoldering buildings inside the city of Qaryatan on Monday, hours after recapturing it from retreating Islamic State militants who had abducted and terrorized dozens of its Christian residents. An Associated Press crew was among the first journalists to enter the city and witness the destruction wrought on the once thriving Christian community and its 5th century monastery, which was bulldozed by the extremist group last summer. Once a cherished pilgrimage site, much of St. Ilian Monastery had been reduced to a pile of stones. Escorted by the Syrian government, the AP crew was allowed to venture only about 1.5 miles inside Qaryatan, which is about 75 miles from Damascus, because Army experts were still clearing explosives and mines left by the militants. Black smoke billowed from the western side of town where skirmishes continued. Near the central square, some residential and government buildings were destroyed, their top floors flattened. Others had gaping holes where they had taken direct artillery hits or were pockmarked by gunfire. Electricity poles and cables were broken and shredded. A snapped tree hung to one side. Late Sunday, a week after taking back the historic town of Palmyra from the Islamic State, Syrian troops and their allies recaptured Qaryatan. Aided by Russian airstrikes, the advance dealt yet another setback to the Islamic State, depriving the extremists of a main base in central Syria that could eventually be used by government forces to launch attacks on militant-held areas near the Iraqi border. Soldiers were visibly buoyed on Monday by their successive battlefield victories. Garayton lies midway between Palmyra and the capital, Damascus, and was once home to a sizable Christian population. Before the Islamic State took it over last August, it had a mixed population of around 40,000 Sunni Muslims and Christians, as well as thousands of internally displaced people who had fled from the nearby city of Homs. As it came under militant attack, many of the Christians fled. More than 200 residents, mostly Christians, were abducted by the extremists, including a Syrian priest, the Reverend Jack Murad, who was held by the extremists for 3 months. During the 8 months that the city was under militant control, some Christians were released. Others were made to sign pledges to pay a tax imposed on non-Muslims. Some have simply vanished. Meanwhile, Pentagon Press Secretary Peter Cook said Monday that the U.S. carried out an airstrike late Sunday on a senior al-Qaeda operational meeting in northwest Syria that resulted in several enemy killed. He said the U.S. believes a senior al-Qaeda figure was at the meeting, and we are working to confirm his death.
Thanks, Don. Here are some shorts from around the world. From Moscow, Russian investigators said the body of an American student had been found on the outskirts of a Siberian village a week after he vanished from a guest house in the night. A statement from the investigative committee said Colin Madson's body was found Monday about a mile outside Arshan, a resort village popular for its mineral springs and proximity to mountains. The statement said that there were no visible injuries to Madsen, 25, and that his documents and money had been left untouched. Madsen of Jefferson City, Missouri, was a student at a university in Irkutsk. And from Abuja, Nigeria, Nigerian security agents have arrested the leader of a breakaway Boko Haram faction, Ansaru, the Ministry of Defense said. If confirmed, he would be the highest level extremist ever captured in the country's 6-year-old war against Islamic jihadis. Ansaru leader Khalid al-Barnawi has a $5 million reward on his head. It is a breakthrough in the fight against terrorism, Defense Ministry spokesman Brigadier General Rabe Abubakar said. He said security agents arrested al-Barnawi, originally named Usman Umar Abubakar, in the southern city of Lokaja on Friday. And from Manila, Philippines, thousands of U.S. and Philippine troops, along with Australian special forces, began annual drills Monday to prepare to quickly respond to a range of potential crises, including in the disputed South China Sea. The exercises have been opposed in recent years by China, which is involved in territorial disputes in the South China Sea with several sides, including the Philippines, and suspects that the drills are part of efforts to contain Beijing. Washington and Manila said the drills are not directed against China, and added that they also focus on preparing for natural disasters and humanitarian crises. U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter will fly to the Philippines to witness some of the 11-day exercises, said Marine Lieutenant General John Tulin, who heads the roughly 5,000 American military personnel taking part in the maneuvers. And finally, from these world shorts, from Dikili, Turkey. A controversial European Union plan to curb migration and smash smuggling rings in Turkey began Monday as 202 migrants from 2 Greek islands were piled onto boats and shipped back to Turkey. Under heavy security, authorities on the Greek islands of Lesbos and Chios deported people from 11 nations, the first in a plan that has drawn strong criticism from human rights advocates, but is seen by some European nations as the only way to resolve the continent's migration crisis. The first vessel from Lesbos was escorted into the Turkish port of Dikili by the Turkish Coast Guard as a helicopter hovered overhead.
Well, man-made global warming is making America sicker, and it's only going to get worse, according to a new federal government report. The 332-page report issued Monday by the Obama administration says global warming will make the air dirtier, water more contaminated, and food more tainted. It warned of diseases such as those spread by ticks and mosquitoes, longer allergy seasons, and thousands of heat wave deaths. Climate change affects people's mental health too, said Environmental Protection Agency Chief Gina McCarthy. It's not just about polar bears and melting ice caps. It's about our families. It's about our future, she said at a White House event. Climate change affects more people in more ways than anything doctors have seen in the past, said Surgeon General Vivek Murthy. He said the report allows doctors to better quantify the sheer number of pathways through which climate affects health. That includes pollen, wildfires, and air pollution worsened by power plants, he said. Not being able to breathe is one of the most frightening experiences for people, Murthy said. We're talking about scary moments for parents and children. Asthma is already the number one cause of children going to the hospital, and now we're seeing it worsening because of the heat, the allergens, and air pollution, said Lynn Goldman, Dean of George Washington University's Public Health School. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention computer simulations of 209 cities show that extra summer heat deaths will outweigh fewer winter cold deaths from climate changes, said the CDC's Shabuye Saha, a lead author of the report. White House science advisor John Holdren said the report was based on more than 1,800 published scientific studies and new federal research. It was reviewed by the National Academies of Sciences. Deb?
Thanks, Don. The headline reads, Joseph Medicine Crow, 102, was a trove of tribal history. Billings, Montana. Joseph Medicine Crow walked in two worlds, white and Native American, and made his mark on each. Medicine Crow, who died Sunday in a Billings hospice at the age of 102, grew up in a log home on Montana's Crow Indian Reservation, hearing stories during his childhood from direct participants in the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Decades later, he returned from World War II, a hero in his own right, for performing a series of daring deeds, which made him his tribe's last surviving war chief. Medicine Crow went on to become a Native American historian. I always told people, when you meet Joe Medicine Crow, you're shaking hands with the 19th century, said Herman Viola, curator emeritus at the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of American Indians. President Barack Obama, who awarded Medicine Crow the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2009, issued a statement Monday praising the World War II veteran as a Bakaticha, which translates to a good man in Crow. Dr. Medicine Crow dedicated much of his life to sharing the stories of his culture and his people, Obama said, and in doing so, he helped shape a fuller history of America for us all. Medicine Crow was raised by his grandparents near Lodge Grass, Montana, where he continued to live in the years leading to his death. His Crow name was High Bird. He recalled listening as a child to stories about the Battle of the Little Bighorn from those who were there, including his grandmother's brother, White Man Runs Him, a scout for Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer. His grandfather raised Medicine Crow to be a warrior. The training began when Medicine Crow was just 6 or 7, with a grueling physical regimen that included running barefoot in the snow to toughen the boy's feet and spirit. Warfare was our highest art, but Plains Indian warfare was not about killing. It was about intelligence, leadership, and honor, Medicine Crow wrote in his 2006 book, Counting Coup. Before leaving for the European front, Medicine Crow in 1939 became the first of his tribe to receive a master's degree in anthropology.
Here's some items from around the nation. From Sevierville, Tennessee, 5 people died Monday when a sightseeing helicopter crashed near the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in eastern Tennessee, officials said. The Bell 206 tourist helicopter crashed about 3:30 p.m. near Sevierville. Federal Aviation Administration spokeswoman Kathleen Bergen said officials said the helicopter was destroyed by fire. Hours after the crash, more than a dozen emergency vehicles were still at the site, which is about 3 miles from Dolly Parton's Dollywood theme park. The victims' names were not released. From New York, a man convicted of the 1964 stabbing death of Kitty Genovese has died in a New York prison at age 81. State prisons spokesman Thomas Maley said Winston Mosley died on March 28 at the Clinton Correctional Facility in Dannemora. Genovese, 28, was a bar manager. Her killing caused an outcry after reports that neighbors heard her screams but didn't try to help. Details of the accounts were challenged, but the crimes spurred the adoption of the 911 system and Good Samaritan laws. Winston spent more than 50 years in prison. He was denied parole 18 times. From New Orleans, a federal judge in New Orleans granted final approval Monday to an estimated $20 billion settlement over the 2010 BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, resolving years of litigation over the worst offshore spill in the nation's history. A settlement was first announced in July. The Justice Department has estimated that the settlement will cost the oil giant as much as $20.8 billion, the largest environmental settlement in U.S. history, as well as the largest ever civil settlement with a single entity. The offshore rig explosion killed 11 workers and caused a 134 million gallon spill. BP has estimated that its costs related to the spill, including its initial cleanup work and the various settlements and criminal and civil penalties, will exceed $53 billion. From Nashville, Tennessee, having already made a .50 caliber sniper gun the official state rifle, Tennessee lawmakers on Monday gave final approval to making the Bible the state's official book, despite arguments by the state attorney general that it conflicts with the Tennessee Constitution. Opponents argued that the Bible would be trivialized by being placed alongside other state symbols, such as the official rock or amphibian. But both chambers voted to send the bill to Republican Governor Bill Haslam. He opposes the measure, but hasn't said whether he'll issue a veto. And finally, from Richmond, Virginia, Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe vetoed a bill Monday that would force schools to warn parents if their children will be assigned books with sexually explicit content. He said it's unnecessary and lacks flexibility. It is unlikely the Senate has the votes to overturn the Democrats' veto.
Thanks, Don. I have one more short article of international interest from Los Angeles. Drone delivery might be years away in the U.S., but it's becoming a reality in Rwanda this summer. A San Francisco-based drone delivery company said that it'll start making its first deliveries of blood and medicine in Rwanda in July. Zipline International Incorporated recently demonstrated its technology in an open field in the San Francisco Bay Area. As a staffer launched a fixed-wing plane weighing just 22 pounds off a launcher that used compressed air. Electric-powered propellers took it the rest of the way on a flight that could extend to 75 miles round trip using military-grade GPS and software to navigate. As it dipped low before the drop-off area, the bottom popped open and a cardboard box with a parachute made of butcher paper and biodegradable tape burst out. Company executives said the cost of each flight was about the same as a motorcycle trip, but far more reliable. And because deliveries of packages up to 3.5 pounds could be completed in 15 to 30 minutes, modest packaging eliminated the need for refrigeration along the way, which saves on wasted supplies such as blood. The firm plans to operate in other countries later this year.
Thank you, Deb. It's 10:22. Time to move on to local and legislative news. Now, from Lincoln, state lawmakers gave initial approval Monday to a proposal that backers say would take the partisanship out of the redistricting process and set a new nationwide gold standard. Legislative Bill 580 A compromise reached by state senators John Morante of Gretna and Heath Mello of Omaha has been 3 years in the making. The bill advanced 30-5 in the Nebraska legislature. Although the legislature is officially nonpartisan, both lawmakers have been active in their political parties. Morante is a Republican, Mello is a Democrat. Supporters hailed the bill's creation of an independent commission of citizens as the best way to redraw the state's political maps for 6 elected bodies: U.S. House, the legislature, public service commissions, University of Nebraska Board of Regents, State Board of Education, and Nebraska Supreme Court. The proposal represents the best elements of independent commissions used for redistricting in other states and will increase the public's trust, Morante said. It's one that I hope becomes a rubric for other states to adopt, he said. Mello agreed, saying Nebraska's bill could be the gold standard. Opponents, however, questioned whether to alter a system that can get emotional and partisan, but gets the job done. A special committee of lawmakers handled the redistricting in 2011, and the senators fought over redrawing the state's 2nd congressional district. Senator Bill Kintner of Papillion said not one Republican has approached him about changing the current system. He questioned what problem would be solved by changing it. If it's only one party asking for it, I've got to ask myself, who's going to benefit? Mello replied that a change is needed because politicians have their own interests in mind and want to draw maps that work for them, not the voters. If Senator Morante and myself, a Democrat and a Republican, can come to some agreement on a process that makes the most political, partisan process in this body as painless as we could make it, knowing that the legislature still controls the outcome, colleagues, that's a long way we've traveled, he said. Under LB 580, redistricting would begin with the nonpartisan Legislative Research Office, which would draw base redistricting maps and submit those to the Independent Redistricting Citizens Advisory Commission. The commission would be created the year following each national census. The state's 3 legislative caucuses, which are based on geographic areas, would pick the commission's 9 members. No more than 5 could be from any one political party. Members of the commission could not be lobbyists or elected officials or anyone related to or employed by an individual who is an elected constitutional officer. The commission would redraw political district maps once the census numbers are released and send the maps to the Nebraska Secretary of State and Attorney General for a formal opinion about their constitutionality. The chief priority would be making the population equal among districts, as well as following county lines, ensuring that districts comply with federal law and making the districts compact and contiguous. At least 4 public hearings would be held across the state to gauge what Nebraskans think before the maps would go to the legislature for approval. The maps would be introduced as separate legislative bills and placed on first-round consideration. If they were not passed and signed into law within 10 days, the commission would go back to work and submit new plans. In 2011, controversy erupted when redrawn maps moved eastern Sarpy County, including Bellevue and Offutt Air Force Base, out of the Omaha-based 2nd Congressional District and moved the Sarpy County communities of La Vista, Papillion, and Gretna into the district. Democrats objected that the change boosted Republican power in the 2nd District, but they were outvoted in the GOP-dominated legislature. Senator Kathy Campbell said the current system does not work, calling it one of the most difficult and rancorous decisions during her 8 years serving in the legislature. It came down to partisan politics, not what was overall best for the state of Nebraska, in my estimation, she said, noting her support for the bill. Senator Dave Bloomfield of Hoskins raised concerns that the commission's makeup could be mostly urban. And Kintner argued that his constituents didn't elect him to hand off his duties to an appointed board. But Moranti said the bill doesn't punt a responsibility because the legislature still has a say. We maintain that responsibility, but we're doing it in a way that separates the drawing of the maps from the politicians, and I think that's a good thing, he said.
Also from the Nebraska legislature, the headline says, "Ending split of electoral votes has new life." From Lincoln, Republican lawmakers took a big step Monday in their effort to return Nebraska to a winner-take-all system of deciding presidential electors. But Legislative Bill 10 has another hurdle to clear before the change could become law. If passed, the measure would take effect in time for the next presidential election in November. The bill cleared second-round consideration after state senators voted 34-15 to cut off a filibuster. The bill then advanced to final-round consideration on a 32-15 vote. All of the senators voting to end the filibuster and advance LB 10 are registered Republicans. Two GOP lawmakers, both term limited, joined the legislature's Democrats and its lone independent in opposition. Nebraska lawmakers are elected and serve on an officially nonpartisan basis. However, partisan politics emerges at times, especially when the issue involves elections. On Monday, state senators John Moranti of Gretna and Bo McCoy of Omaha used their speaking time to corral reluctant Republican senators. Moranti warned that there would come a time when each of them would have to cast a vote on the bill, regardless of whether you have the LB10 virus, a reference to senators who check out before key votes. McCoy talked about a couple of recalcitrant members whose absence might mean the difference between success and failure in ending the filibuster. In the end, all 49 senators were present and voted on the motion for cloture. 2 abstained on the vote to advance the bill. Whether those votes all stick together in the face of another expected filibuster at the final stage of debate remains to be seen. It takes 33 of the 49 senators to end a filibuster. Returning to a winner-take-all system of awarding electoral college votes has been a priority for the state GOP since Nebraska abandoned that method in 1991. For the past 25 years, the state has awarded 3 of its 5 electoral college votes on the basis of which candidate wins each congressional district. The 2 other votes go to the statewide winner. The state split its votes in 2008 when the Omaha area's 2nd district vote went to Barack Obama, the Democratic candidate, while the rest of the state's votes went to John McCain, the Republican. Senator Sue Crawford of Bellevue was among those arguing for retaining the current system. She said it gets people more interested in elections and attracts more interest from candidates. It also draws more campaign money into the state, she said. Crawford said Republican-dominated Nebraska would draw little attention from presidential campaigns without the possibility of having 1 or 2 electoral votes in contention. This is absolutely not the year to make ourselves irrelevant, she said. On the other hand, McCoy argued that Nebraska's proportional allocation method makes sense only if all other states adopt it too. Maine is the only other state that allows for split electoral votes. To me, it's a matter of fairness. It's not partisan politics, he said. Backers of LB 10 said the state has more power when its electoral votes are awarded together. Senator Bob Christ of Omaha said he could see both sides of the issue and has gone back and forth with his vote. Is it stronger to keep our votes together? Is it stronger to matter? He asked. LB 10 was introduced last year by McCoy. It has faced a filibuster at every stage of its consideration. Last year, supporters managed to break the first-round filibuster but fell short on second round. The measure returned for debate this year after being renamed a priority bill by Senator Robert Hilkeman of Omaha.
Well, here's some brief items from around the metro area, the state of Nebraska, and Iowa. Now from the metro area. Omaha Fire Department rescuers pulled a man out of a sewer Monday night near 94th and Burt Streets after he went in trying to rescue his girlfriend's cat. The girlfriend reported the incident at 7:23 p.m. The 55-year-old man had already been in the sewer for an hour at that time. Firefighters popped manholes around the area until they made contact, and he was found about 8:40, about 4 blocks north of where he entered. A fire crew specializing in confined space rescues was called and pulled him out. Paramedics checked out the man who had some cuts and scrapes and returned him to his apartment. Going into sewers is not a great idea, given the potential for poisonous gases, Battalion Chief Jerry Anderson said. The man was very lucky, he said. The cat was not found. I think a cat would have a better chance at a sewer. Okay. From Nebraska, Columbus police are investigating the shooting deaths of a couple found in their home Saturday afternoon. Relatives found the man and woman in their northwest Columbus house about 4 p.m., said Captain Todd Falcon. The relatives went to check on the couple after not hearing from them. The 61-year-old man had a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and the 60-year-old woman had a gunshot wound caused by someone else, Falcon said. Police haven't released the couple's names, but neighbors confirmed they were Clyde and Denise Langan. A 68-year-old semi-trailer driver from Ravenna died Friday when he was hit by a train in Adams County. Alan Lanham was driving a fertilizer truck south of Heartland Avenue, just east of Hastings, about 4 p.m. when he was hit by a train while driving across the train tracks, according to the Nebraska State Patrol. Lanham, who was driving for Loeffenholtz Trucking, was killed at the scene. Part of the eastbound BNSF railway train was derailed, the State Patrol said. Investigators don't know why he didn't yield to the train. He was the only one on the truck, and no one else was injured in the accident. From Grand Island, a Grand Island man was arrested on numerous counts after a failed April Fool's prank. Grand Island Police Captain Dean Elliott said Daniel Weddle, 49, was arrested early Saturday morning after he entered the Arby's restaurant on South Locust Street wielding a gun. Just before midnight, Weddle entered the restaurant and demanded money from the employees, 4 of whom fled and called police. Hearing the commotion, the restaurant manager came out and recognized Weddle as a restaurant employee. Weddle explained that his actions were an April Fool's prank, Elliott said. Weddle then left the restaurant and attempted to drive away, but was stopped by police. He was arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence, 4 counts of terroristic threats, 3 counts of child abuse. His 3 children, ages 15, 14, and 8, were in the vehicle with him, 3 counts of driving under the influence with children in the vehicle, and possession of drug paraphernalia for a marijuana pipe found in the vehicle. Elliott said the gun that was displayed during the fake robbery was a BB handgun. Not a very funny joke.
No.
From Iowa, Logan, Iowa. A Logan man faces up to 25 years in prison for a night of drinking that ended with the death of a pedestrian. As part of an agreement with prosecutors, Austin Arndt, 26, pleaded guilty to vehicular homicide by operating while intoxicated in the death of Charlotte Anderson, 50. Arndt entered the plea Monday afternoon in Harrison County District Court. Sentencing is scheduled for 1:30 p.m. on April 18. As part of the agreement, Arndt will also have his driver's license suspended for 6 years and is ordered to pay more than $150,000 in restitution. Although around 11 p.m. on July 4, Arndt, driving a pickup truck, struck Anderson, who was walking on Highway 127 near the north exit of Logan Magnolia High School. Anderson was found dead at the scene. An investigation led to Arndt, who was arrested later in the month. He told police that he'd been at a bar and consumed between 15 and 17 beers within less than 6 hours before the accident. Deb?
Thanks, Don. Also from the legislature, physician-assisted death proposal falls flat. Chambers, the bill's sponsor, says measure will be accepted in Nebraska one day. From Lincoln, a lopsided vote against allowing physicians to prescribe life-ending drugs for terminally ill adults Monday was no surprise to the bill's sponsor. But State Senator Ernie Chambers of Omaha, who introduced Legislative Bill 1056, predicted there will be a time when physicians' aid in dying is accepted in Nebraska. It is on the way. It is inevitable, he told colleagues. For this year, however, Nebraska lawmakers refused to move the bill out of the Judiciary Committee where it had stalled. 28 senators voted against Chambers' motion to pull the bill. 9 senators voted for the motion and 6 abstained. The vote represents the end of the road for the Patient Choice at End of Life Act this year. Chambers began the debate by acknowledging that he knew the bill did not have enough support to advance. He said he was fulfilling his promise to bring the issue up for debate. He vowed to continue working on the issue if he is reelected this year. This, for me, I'm sure, is going to be the first step in a very long and arduous journey, Chambers said. LB 1056 would have made Nebraska the 6th state to legalize what opponents call assisted suicide and supporters term death with dignity. The bill was patterned after an Oregon law that allows a doctor to prescribe lethal drugs to terminally ill people with less than 6 months to live. Such patients would have to self-administer the drugs. The bill included several safeguards aimed at ensuring that the people seeking a physician's help to end their lives were mentally competent and doing so voluntarily. But Senator Mike Glore of Grand Island, a retired hospital administrator, spoke against the idea. He said that there have been great advances made in hospice care and palliative care, which can ease the dying process. He also raised concerns about liability with an aid in dying law. He said he has experienced cases in which families agreed on providing only comfort care for a dying member, then later sued the hospital for not doing everything possible for that person. Senator Bill Kittner of Omaha also opposed the bill. He said people who are dying need support, not a means to end their lives. I don't think that we need to play God, he said. We help people live. We don't help people die. Chambers, however, said a majority of the public would support legislation like LB 1056. He read from a letter written by former State Senator Dave Newell of Omaha, who is in the advanced stages of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, also known as ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease. Newell said that having the option of taking life-ending medication would allow him to, quote, be the captain of my own ship, rather than slowly suffocating as his disease progresses. I am not afraid to die. I am more afraid of suffering, he said. I don't see any value in pointless, useless suffering.
Okay, thank you, Deb. Well, it's 10:40, and due to the number of funeral arrangements and death notices in both papers, we're going to begin. And I'm going to begin with those found in the Lincoln Journal-Star. And the first notice is for Axberg, Elmer R. Axberg, age 85 of Lincoln. It just says funeral arrangements are pending. Berger, Todd Berger, age 62, from Wellington, Colorado. In lieu of flowers, consider giving blood/platelets or to the American Cancer Society. There'll be a celebration of life on April 24th at the Wind Song Event Center in Fort Collins, Colorado. Bullock, Tom Bullock, formerly of Lincoln, passed away in Ibarra, Ecuador. For information and a location for the informal celebration of Tom's life, you can access yourtribute.com/tbullock. That's visitmemorial.yourtribute.com/tbullock. Borchers, Reinhard Riney was his nickname. Riney John Henry Borchers, age 85, fought in the Korean War, service veteran. Buttress, Mazer, and Love Funeral Home. Memorials to the family. Services are Thursday, April 7th. Craigie, Cleo Jean Craigie, age 94 of Lincoln. Memorials to the American Legion Auxiliary, Unit 3, or the Second Baptist Church. Wyuka Funeral Home can provide you with more details. Flewelling, Randy Lee Flewelling, age 56 of Lincoln. Memorials to the family. No funeral home has been provided. There will be a celebration of life, 2 p.m. April 9 at Cornhusker Social Hall. Gustafson, Timothy A. Gustafson, age 55 of Lincoln, of service veteran. Memorial service is Saturday, 4 to 9 at Indian Hills Community Church. No funeral home provided. Helsing, Connie J. Helsing, age 73, born in Wahoo, passed away in Lincoln. Bruce Nabity Funeral Home in Wahoo is handling the details. Kaufman, Gottlieb Scotty, nicknamed Scotty. Scotty Kaufman was 96 years old. Military burial, Wyuka Cemetery. Wyuka Funeral Home can provide you with details. Koch, Sybil R. Koch, age 90 of Lincoln. Memorials to the Humane Society. Funeral arrangements are Buthurst, Mazer, and Love Funeral Home. Lee, Fern L. Lee, Waverly, formerly of Lincoln, age 88. More information to follow. Memken, Mehmken, Roy E. Menken, age 70. No other information available at this time. Peterson, Loretta Catherine Peterson, age 79 of Wahoo. Memorials to the American Cancer Society or Vasculitis Foundation. Svoboda Funeral Home in Wahoo can provide you with details. Raymer, Douglas Lee Raymer, age 55 of Crete. Member of the National Guard for 8 years. For flower or plant memorials, please send to house. Well, it says condolences at www.aspenaftercare. No funeral home has been provided, but the service will be 2 p.m. Thursday, April 14th at First Lutheran Church in Wilbur. SAS, S-A-H-S, John. No age has been provided. Let's see, John Sass Memorials in care of Larson Tractor Museum Friends, which or to the Emmanuel Lutheran Church. No funeral home has been provided. Schlake, Shirley A. Schlake, age 62 of Crete. Kunsel Funeral Home in Crete can provide you with details. Skoda, Lillian M. Skoda, age 74 of Lincoln. Services pending at Wyuka Funeral Home. Thompson, Clarence Ray Thompson, age 86 of Lincoln. Served in the Army during the Korean conflict. Graveside services will be held 11 a.m. on April 9th at Lincoln Memorial Park and Funeral Home in the Four Apostles area, it says. Truba, Sylvester J. Truba of Dwight, age 86. More information to follow. Trumbull, Mary Jo Trumbull, age 63 of Ashland. Memorials to the Ashland Care Center. Roper and Sons can provide you with more details. Weidman, W-I-E-D-E-M-A-N, Julie K. Weidman, Cell, age 54 of Lincoln. Buthurst, Mazer, and Love Funeral Home can provide you with any details. Sangari, Dominic Mick Sangari was age 70 of Lincoln. Donations in Mick's memory are suggested to the Heartland Cancer Foundation or to the charitable organization of the donor's choice. Condolences can be left at Aspirin Aftercare. And those, I should say, are the notices in today's Lincoln Journal Star, Deb.
Thanks, Don. Turning to the obituaries and funeral arrangements in the Omaha World Herald. Acromus, Jane A. Acromus, age 53. The Mass of Christian burial will be Thursday at 10 o'clock at St. Peter and Paul Catholic Church. Hefe Hoffman-Dorr Cutlers has the arrangements. Bill Gary, or maybe Bill Jerry, Bilgere, Michael W. Bill Jerry, age 76. A complete notice will follow from Coriskil, Larkin, Staskowitz. Breesy, Kinuko Breesy, age 69. There will be only a private family service. Arbor Cremation Society is in charge of arrangements. Carson, Sue Hatsua Moromizato Carson, age 79, of Bellevue. The memorial service will start at 7 p.m. Wednesday, April 6th at the Bellevue Memorial Chapel. A private family burial will be held at Bellevue Cemetery. Memorials are suggested to Hillcrest Hospice or the charity of your choice. Bellevue Memorial Chapel is in charge of arrangements. Colette, David L. Colette, age 64. A memorial visitation will be held in Omaha on Wednesday, April 6th at John A. Gentleman Mortuary on 144th and Pacific from 4:30 to 7:30. A Mass of Christian burial will be held at St. Peter's Catholic Church in Aurora, Kansas on Saturday, April 9th. The family requests no flowers or plants. Memorials can be directed to the family to be donated to Lovewell State Park for playground equipment. John A. Gentleman Mortuaries is in charge of arrangements. Davis, Hal A. Davis, age 90. Mr. Davis was a veteran. Services will be held Thursday at 1 o'clock at the Hefe Hoffman-Dorr Cutler Mortuary on 51st and F Street. Interment will be Calvary Cemetery with military honors by the Benson VFW Post 2503. Memorials are asked to the Nebraska Humane Society. Hefe Hoffman-Dorr Cutler is in charge of arrangements. Denton, Jacqueline Grace Denton, aged 78, of Kimballton, Iowa. No services are planned at this time. Kessler Funeral Home in Audubon, Iowa is in charge of arrangements. Farragutti, Aaron Farragutti, aged 40. The funeral service will be Wednesday, April 6th at St. Philip Neri Church on 8200 North 30th Street. Funeral Mass is at 10:30 a.m. Aaron gave the gift of life to others through organ donation. Freeze, Mike Freeze, age 56. There will be a memorial gathering of family and friends Tuesday from 6 to 8 p.m. at the John A. Gentleman 72nd Street Chapel. In lieu of flowers, donations suggested to the Open Door Mission or Easter Seals. John A. Gentleman Mortuaries is in charge of arrangements. Gary, Helen J. Gary, age 68, of Elkhorn. Funeral Mass will be Thursday, April 7th at 10:30 at St. John's Catholic Church in Valley. Memorials are asked to St. Jude's Children's Hospitals. Reichmuth Funeral Homes on West Maple are in charge of arrangements. Gerthofer, Joseph E. Gerthofer Jr., age 66. There will be a visitation from 5 to 7 Wednesday at the Roeder Mortuary, 108th Street Chapel. In lieu of flowers, memorials are asked to the Nebraska Humane Society. Horstman, Dorothy A. Horstman, age 85, of Gretna. A graveside service will be held Thursday at 11 a.m. at Evergreen Memorial Park in Omaha. In lieu of flowers, memorials are asked to the Sarpy County Museum. Roeder Mortuary, the Gretna Chapel, is in charge of arrangements. Houston, Robert R. Houston, age 56. Thomas Funeral Home is in charge of arrangements. Hunt, Thomas L. Hunt, age 64. Memorial service will be Thursday at 10 o'clock at the Coriskil, Larkin, Staskowitz Mortuary on F Street. Kane, Dorothy J. Kane, aged 85. The celebration of life will be Saturday, April 9th from 1 to 4 p.m. at 533 North 73rd Street. In lieu of flowers, donations are requested to the Visiting Nurses Association Hospice. Good Shepherd Funeral Home is in charge of arrangements. Cantor, Marjorie Cantor, also called Margarita, 88 years old. A complete notice will follow later from Hefe Hoffman-Dorr Cutler. Lakin, Charles Edward Lakin, aged 94. Funeral services will be held at 10:30 Saturday, April 9th at the First Baptist Church in Emerson, Iowa. Memorials will be made may be made to the Boys and Girl Club of the Midlands, 815 North 16th Street in Council Bluffs. Nelson Boyle and Lorette Funeral Chapel of Red Oak is in charge of arrangements. Lamont, Robert R. Rob Lamont, age 51. Services will be Thursday at 11 o'clock at the Heafy Hoffman Dweck Cutler Mortuary on F Street. In lieu of flowers, memorials are asked to the Lamont Children's Education Fund. Lanham, Alan Lee Allen, also known as John, age 68, of Ravenna, Nebraska. Services will be 10:30 in the morning, Wednesday, April 6th, at the Ravenna City Auditorium. Rasmussen Funeral Home in Ravenna is in charge of arrangements. Lautenschlager, Donna L. Lautenschlager, age 83, of Carter Lake. A funeral service will be Thursday at 11 o'clock, followed by a luncheon at Cutler O'Neill Meyer Woodring Funeral Home. Memorials are suggested to the Lakeview Bible Church. Leger, L-E-G-E-R, Helen M. Leger, aged 87. A complete notice will follow from Bethany Funeral Home. Milder, Rhoda Milder, aged 94. Graveside services will be held Tuesday, April 5th at 11:30 a.m. at Golden Hill Cemetery on North 42nd Street. Memorials may be made to Temple Israel or the Rose Blumkin Jewish Home, and the Jewish Funeral Home is in charge of arrangements. Miller, Penny Faye Miller, aged 48, of Omaha. It was Penny's wish to be cremated, and no services will be held. Chapel of Memories on Arbor Street is in charge of arrangements. Paddock, Nathan A. Paddock Jr., aged 99. Graveside service Wednesday at 2:30 p.m. at West Lawn Hillcrest Cemetery. West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home is in charge of arrangements. Peterson, Loretta Catherine Peterson, age 79, of Wahoo, Nebraska. The Mass of Christian Burial will be 10 o'clock Thursday, April 7th at St. Wenceslaus Catholic Church in Wahoo. Memorials are asked to the American Cancer Society or the Vasculitis Foundation. Svoboda Funeral Home in Wahoo is in charge of arrangements. Postani, Joseph John Postani. Mr. Postani was a veteran, served in the Navy, and served both during the Korean and the Vietnam Wars. The memorial service will be held at the West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home on April 7th at 11 a.m. Memorials are suggested to the disabled American veterans in Joe's memory. West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home is in charge of arrangements. Savage, Richard L. Dick Savage, age 75. Mr. Savage was a veteran of the United States Air Force. The funeral service will be at 10 a.m. April 8th at Cape Art Chapel in Bellevue. In lieu of flowers, memorials sent to the family will be distributed to St. Jude Hospital and Huntington Park Care Center. Schaap, Jacqueline S. Schaap, 92, a member of the National Association of Railway Businesswomen and a member of the Eastern Star. Memorials here. Visitation will be Tuesday from 5 to 8 with an Eastern Star service at 6:30 conducted by the Xarban Chapter 277. Memorials will go to the Tangier Shrine Hospital Transportation Fund. John A. Gentleman Mortuaries is in charge of arrangements. Skradsky, Mary R. Golitzia Skradsky, age 94. Funeral will be Wednesday starting at 9:20 at Bethany Chapel and then to Saints Peter and Paul Church, 36th and X Street for 10 a.m. Mass of Christian Burial. Memorials will be directed by the family. Bethany Funeral Home is in charge of arrangements. Susie, Doug Susie, RN, age 60. Memorial service will be Thursday at 11 o'clock at Luther Memorial Lutheran Church. In lieu of flowers, memorials may be made to the American Alzheimer's Association. John A. Gentleman Mortuaries is in charge of arrangements. Stoddard, Robert Jean Stoddard, age 61. The family will receive friends Tuesday, April 5th from 5 to 7 at the Heafy Hoffman Dweck Cutler Mortuary on 51st and F. Stubbs, Roy H. Stubbs, age 71. A memorial service will be Tuesday, April 5th at 3 o'clock at the Heafy Hoffman Dweck Cutler Mortuary on 51st and F. Suing, Donna M. Suing, age 74. The memorial service will be Thursday at 10 o'clock at Rhoda Mortuary, 108th Street Chapel. There will be no visitation. In lieu of flowers, memorials may be made to the Arthritis Foundation. Rhoda Mortuary, 108th Street Chapel is in charge of arrangements. Swingholm, Donald L. Swingholm, Sr., age 73. The memorial service will be Wednesday at 11 o'clock at the Vinton Street Chapel of Heafy Hoffendorf Cutler. Memorials may be directed to the family. Titsworth, William J. Billy Titsworth, age 61. Mr. Titsworth was a veteran of the Marine Corps. Funeral service will be 11 o'clock Thursday, April 7th at the Good Shepherd Funeral Home on South 24th Street. Whitehill, Muriel M. Whitehill of Omaha, aged 86. The funeral service will be at 1 o'clock Thursday at the Roeder Mortuary. Roeder Mortuary on 108th Street. Chapel is in charge of arrangements. And finally, Zarbano, Lucy Zarbano, aged 91. The massive Christian burial will be Tuesday at 10 o'clock, which is before now, at Christ the King Church, and Heafy Hoffendorf Cutler is in charge of arrangements.
Well, thank you, Deb. It's about 2 minutes before the hour, and we got, I guess, about a minute early. But we're still going to take our break right now. We're still going to remind everyone that listeners' memorials to the Radio Talking Book Network are tax deductible and will go a long way in keeping Radio Talking Book on the air. Please keep Radio Talking Book in mind when memorials are listed as Donor's Choice or your favorite charity. Donations should be sent to Radio Talking Book Network, 7101 Newport Avenue, Suite 205, Omaha, Nebraska, 68152. Thank you for being a Radio Talking Book Network listener and supporter.
Thank you very much, Don.
Tuesday, April 1st, barbecue chicken, number 1, 8 green, coleslaw, and warm lemon cake, and a pint of 1% milk.
If you're dealing with vision loss or blindness, you'll want to join Outlook Nebraska for the 2016 Visually Impaired Community Resource Fair. Join us Saturday, April 30th from 9 to 2 at West Roads Mall at the Von Mar Court, where dozens of local resources are available to help you deal with visual impairment or blindness. Like Outlook Nebraska Resource Fair to get all the information. And then join us, won't you? It's the 2016 Visually Impaired Community Resource Fair, Saturday, April 30th from 9 to 2 at West Roads Mall at the Von Mar Court, presented by Outlook Nebraska. Profile America, Tuesday, April 5th. One of the world's foremost life-saving medicines, insulin, became available this month in 1923 for treating diabetes. Insulin is a hormone produced by the pancreas and is critical in the processing of carbohydrates in the human body. It was first isolated the year before by a Canadian team led by Dr. Frederick Banding at the University of Toronto.
You know, I remember as a younger person when that Kitty Genovese thing happened.
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading about it. Why, how can people?
Right. I just looked out their window and waited. And of course, New York. Was it New York?
Yeah, but it was in today's
I saw
New York
it.
Times.
Yeah. Oh, it was the
Yeah,
Times
and
too.
they said, you know, they did this research and it wasn't as bad. There were very few people that had heard anything.
Mm.
And some thought it was just a cool. The people, the guy and his girl were arguing.
Yeah.
And 2 people did call the police. But I mean, it was still bad.
Yeah. Well. Thanks, Paul. We'll begin now with the editorial section of the Omaha World Herald, and I'll begin with the Public Pulse. First letter is from Judy Medakovich of Bellevue. Why don't we forget about the sour sower license plate, really referring to the production halted to add right sower to plate design, April 2nd, World Herald, and celebrate our Henry Dorley Zoo, ranked among the best in the country, with the zoo animals on our new license plate. Again, Judy Madakovich of Bellevue. From Roger Durand of Omaha. As a designer and a Nebraskan, I applaud the killing of the AirSats sower tags. If our plates are truly a billboard for our state, let them not be an amateurish admission of lack of taste or a pathetic plea for attention. I, for one, do not want someone else's bad art on my elegant car in colors that clash. The character and attractiveness of a state cannot and should not be reduced to a symbol or two on a muddy piece of tin. The spare and confident design of black characters on a white background, nebraska.gov, and an annual sticker in the corner, plus the ubiquitous ugly dealer's advertising frames, are more than enough. From Roger Durand of Omaha. From A.L. Cash of Omaha. You would think that Nebraska must have everything under control, taxes, welfare, health care, and so forth, when so many people become obsessed with an innocent image on a license plate. Come on, folks. It is only an artist's depiction of an artist's depiction of the sower. Is this what we're talking about when we say Nebraska nice? Again, A.L. Cash of Omaha. From Curtis Bryant of Omaha. While I agree with other letter writers that Omaha Senator Ernie Chambers' outburst was over the top during consideration of the bill that would have protected employees from discrimination because of sexual orientation, he was right to be angry. The legislature's ongoing refusal to support non-discrimination in employment is inexcusable. Not only is non-discrimination the right thing to do, it is also in Nebraska's interest. More and more employers support non-discrimination and want to do business in places that have such laws. I'm proud that my city, Omaha, has a non-discrimination ordinance. It was controversial when passed, but seems to have caused no problems. I share Chambers' anger and want the legislature to enact non-discrimination statewide next year. That again was from Curtis Bryant of Omaha. From Sandra Hanna of Omaha. The Urban Abbey in Omaha's Old Market recently welcomed guests to hear Palestinian Bashara Nasser, Executive Director of the Nakba Museum Project of Memory and Hope, and Rabbi Joseph Berman, Government Affairs Liaison for the Jewish Voice for Peace, speak about the history behind the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the abusive occupation today. Both men support the nonviolent boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, whose purpose is to end the human rights violations perpetuated by Israel's 47-year occupation. Nakba refers to Palestinians' expulsion from their villages during the creation of the country of Israel. Today, more than 5.3 million Palestinian refugees are in camps in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and in the diaspora. The rationing of water, electricity, and calories is not humane. Vicious nighttime raids, armed bulldozer house demolitions, and colonization of Palestinian lands don't fit the description of occupiers' duties. International law states an occupier is responsible for the health and safety of occupied peoples as they move towards self-determination, not demise. Again, that's from Sandra Hanna of Omaha. And finally, from John Duke Barrientos Jr. of Omaha. Muslims of good faith must come to the aid of the innocents of the world. Peace-loving Muslims should separate themselves from the radicals, even if they are their friends, neighbors, or family. This is the only true and effective way to save lives. Why does it have to be just Muslims? It doesn't, but the vast majority of those who have left the U.S. to join the Islamic State seem to be from Muslim families. It is those individuals who have placed such a terrible accusation upon the good Muslims of the world. Our mentality is to depend on law enforcement or the military to locate and stop terrorists, but they need help. Those who know who the radicals are need to stop consciously concealing and protecting them. It may not be easy to turn these people in, but it has to be done. There is no telling when one or more of their own family may become victims of violence because of the actions of someone they know. Stopping terrorism is the responsibility of every American. Each and every one of us must be a soldier to the cause. Again, that's from John Duke Barrientos, Jr.
Thank you, Deb. Well, let's listen to what the World Herald opinion writers have to say. And the They have a couple of different opinions in today's paper. The first deals with the license plate controversy. It says, back to the drawing board. Nebraska's latest effort at creating a new license plate ran head-on into the wrong solar sculpture. Production now is halted while state officials seek a more accurate depiction of the iconic statue that stands atop our state capitol. It's a little hard to understand how Nebraska keeps having plate problems, which border on a ritual. Many other states manage this bit of automotive administration with very little fuss. In 2009, the Department of Motor Vehicles invited the public to vote in an online poll to choose from 4 designs. Thousands of votes wound up being tossed out after a humor website urged people to choose the most boring option. The moment it was released, comments about this year's initial solar design ranged from okay to ugly to lewd to a conspiracy to sell the more expensive specialty plates. Then the World Herald reported that a solar design was patterned after a sculpture at Michigan State University. Still, it's just a license plate. It's easy to see why some people simply shrug and ask, who cares? Does it matter? Well, the DMV reports that some 1.1 million passenger vehicles carried the goldenrod metallark plate in 2015. So that's a lot of little billboards out there advertising Nebraska. We can all hope the final new design will be an accurate and attractive depiction of the soar. But with license plates, as with art, beauty clearly lies in the eye of the beholder. And the second opinion from the writers of the World Herald, Justice Bill advances, fewer secrets. The legislature has advanced a bill that would make several sound improvements on the law enforcement front. The measure would pry open secret grand jury proceedings after police-involved shootings, set a minimum state standard for police officers using body cameras, and improve the photo lineups used to identify criminals. State Senator Heath Mellow's legislative bill 1000 enjoyed unanimity of support. Its backers, including Omaha Senator Ernie Chambers, Douglas County Attorney Don Klein, and Omaha Police Chief Todd Schmaderer, all support LB 1000 because it would improve public safety by boosting public access to information and making the process of interacting with police clearer and more transparent. If the bill becomes law, fewer people might question a grand jury's decision not to indict an officer because they will have access to the transcripts of what the grand jurors heard. It would no longer matter whether an officer with a body camera was in Omaha or Broken Bow. There'd be certain standards for how cameras are used and how long video records are kept. And fewer people might be misidentified by witnesses because Nebraska would follow stricter standards for presenting photos of suspects. All these changes seek to improve the trust our system requires to work well. Deb?
Thanks, Don. Here's an editorial that appeared in the Washington Post. It's by a person called Jackson Deal. And the headline says, "The NATO that Trump doesn't see." Donald Trump's recent rhetoric about an obsolete NATO alliance has surely disturbed Germans and French who think about their nation's security, but their anxiety level is probably low next to that of a dozen Eurasian nations that Trump has probably never considered, including a few that are not even members of NATO. One of them is Georgia. This predominantly Christian former Soviet republic of 4.5 million people bet its future a dozen years ago on the notion that it could pull away from Moscow's sphere of influence and integrate into the West. With broad popular support, its political leaders have struggled to build a market economy and liberal political institutions, including free media, independent courts, and competitive elections. The results have frequently been mixed. There have been ups and downs, including a Russian invasion in 2008 that stripped Georgia of 2 of its provinces. Yet until now, the nation has been kept largely on track by its single-minded pursuit of 2 big goals: membership in the European Union and admission to NATO. Now suddenly, both the Union and the alliance appear in danger of crumbling at the hands of populists and nationalists who would retreat behind refortified borders, turn away migrants, and abandon international commitments. What happens if the Trumpists win? Definitely that will be a shock for Georgian society, the country's elected president, Georgi Margvelashvili, told me last week. And of course, it would be a very serious problem for our security, because we have a neighbor that has a very different idea of what Georgia should be. That, of course, would be Russia. As Margvelashvili pointed out, Georgia shares its potential dilemma with a larger region. Trump's complaints, and those of President Barack Obama about the free riders of NATO, such as Germany and France, ignore the critical role the alliance has played for a host of smaller and far less prosperous nations since the end of the Cold War. Under the alliance's tutelage, countries that might have lapsed into dictatorships or chaos instead became functioning democracies. To earn NATO's security guarantees or even a looser association as partners for peace, they granted rights to ethnic minorities, tolerated opposition media, and cracked down on corruption. In the end, NATO oversaw what was probably the most successful nation-building effort in history. A score of countries, Poland and Hungary, Latvia and Estonia, Serbia and Croatia, and yes, Ukraine and Georgia, adopted the Western liberal model of statehood under the Allies' scrutiny, even though not all have yet joined NATO or the European Union. A Trump victory would put that historic geopolitical shift at risk. It would open the question of whether new NATO members, such as the Baltic states, were really safe from Russian aggression. And it would maroon a bunch of countries that are on their way to Western integration but haven't yet arrived there. Trump and his supporters might dismiss such a loss, but Margvelashvili said they would regret it. You cannot discount countries that are smaller because you think this is the way the world order works, he said. If you push cases like Georgia and Ukraine into some bad portfolio and forget about them, you will get further complications, not only vis-a-vis Russia, but in other parts of the world where regional powers, China, say, or Iran, aspire to dominate their neighbors. Georgia offers perhaps the clearest example of how the prospect of NATO membership and progress in consolidating democracy have been intertwined. In 2012, the pro-Western government was ousted in a parliamentary election, itself a democratic achievement of sorts. The new coalition was led by Bidzina Ivanishvili, a billionaire with Trump-like qualities. For a while, it looked like the new regime might reverse much of what the country had accomplished. Leaders of the previous government were hounded with criminal investigations. Media not supportive of the government came under pressure. But Ivanishvili had promised that he would continue seeking European Union and NATO membership, which gave Brussels and Washington extraordinary leverage. Thanks to their pressure, the political opposition is still functioning. The most-watched TV network remains critical of the government, and elections scheduled for this fall look to be hotly competitive. Oh, and by the way, Georgia still has 750 troops under NATO command in Afghanistan. The rhetoric from Trump has given a boost to pro-Russian parties in Georgia's campaign. Their argument, said Margvelashvili, has been consistent. You might want NATO, you might want Europe, but it is not going to happen. Until now, it hasn't been a persuasive argument. Georgia's president and leaders like him across Eurasia can only hope the U.S. political season does not make it so.
Thank you, Deb. Well, it's time to move on to the entertainment and life sections of the paper. And here's an article out of Seattle. The patient tag on the board outside the hyperbaric chamber says T. Turtle, who is having buoyancy problems. He probably has bubbles in his gastrointestinal tract. They prevent him from diving, making him more vulnerable as prey. He's Tucker, the rescued olive ridley sea turtle being rehabbed at the Seattle Aquarium. This is one lucky turtle. He was found washed ashore at Cannon Beach, Oregon, unable to swim, close to death. The aquarium staff took him in December 14th. helped him to breathe around the clock for a week, pumping air into his lungs by hand until he could do so on his own. On Monday, Tucker became the first non-human patient to receive treatment at Virginia Mason's Center for Hyperbaric Medicine. Dr. James Holm and his team worked with Dr. Lasana Lehner from the aquarium as Tucker was sedated and wheeled on a gurney into the chamber. Most people treated there have the diver's condition known as decompression sickness, or the bends, or they have carbon monoxide poisoning or need help with injuries such as non-healing diabetic wounds and tissue damaged by radiation during cancer treatments. Tucker was given pure oxygen and was exposed to about 2.8 atmospheres of pressure, the equivalent of submerging to 60 feet. Once every minute, on cue from the control board, Lehner, a veterinarian, squeezed a blue bag, giving the turtle another breath. He was occasionally given an air brake off the pure oxygen. Blood samples were taken during Tucker's 2.5 hours in the chamber and sent out through airlocks. His temperature and heart rate were continually monitored. Virginia Mason donated its services. Turtles don't have insurance. Holm, who has been diving for 4 decades and on occasion swims with turtles, knew what was possible in assisting the aquarium and Tucker with appropriate treatment. The treatment ended. Tucker's tubes and monitors were removed, and he was wheeled out to a waiting van and back to the aquarium. He's eating on his own, but it will take a CT scan later this week to be sure the air pockets have decreased. Beautiful animals, those turtles.
Yes, thanks. Speaking of animals, we have another animal story here. The headline says, "What is Big Gray Poops a Lot?" Answer: an elephant in quarantine at Henry Dorley Zoo waiting to go on public view. Once every 2 or 3 days, a truck leaves the zoo, pulling behind it a trailer full of elephant dung. The trailer is about the size of a car, and it's headed for Ashland. The tarp-covered truck takes the load from the Henry Dorley Zoo and Aquarium to the Lee G. Simmons Conservation Park and Wildlife Safari. The trailer then tips and dumps the load, black plastic trash bags and all, into a hole in the ground. Then it's lit on fire, said Dr. Doug Armstrong, Director of Animal Health at the zoo. The reason? Parasites. We don't want to introduce any new ticks into the United States, so that's really an overwhelming concern, Armstrong said. There aren't really a lot of major infectious disease issues with elephants, so it was really more about parasites. Anytime an animal is imported to the United States, it must undergo a federally mandated quarantine period. The zoo's 6 new elephants are being held in quarantine for about 30 days or until released by the Department of Agriculture veterinarians who have been inspecting them. With the end of that 30 days on the horizon, the elephants are expected to be released from quarantine and go on display any day now. Every day since the zoo's elephants arrived from Swaziland, Africa, on March 11th, keepers have shoveled elephant poop into black trash bags to load onto a trailer and then sprayed those bags with insecticide. Each elephant fills a bag or more a day, Armstrong said. When the trailer arrives at the wildlife park, the dung is still fresh, so staff members use diesel fuel as an accelerant to torch it. They can't wait for it to dry out because there could be tick larvae inside. It's a complicated process when you think about poop, Armstrong said. After they've dumped and burned the load, staffers at the wildlife park bury the ash at least 6 feet underground near the park's composting pile and away from other animals. While the elephants wait in quarantine, nothing, not even a little excrement, goes unchecked. That process began immediately. Before the elephants were loaded in Swaziland, the crates had tarps strung underneath to catch any leakage. They were rewrapped along the route for safety. Then when the animals arrived in Omaha, more than a dozen workers in partial hazmat suits hauled black trash bags full of material out of the crates, sprayed them with insecticide, and sprayed the inside of the trailer. That first load was trucked to Kansas City to be torched. Armstrong said that was the nearest approved incinerating facility, and the zoo wanted to be extra careful. In many cases, it's just overkill, but we're doing everything we can to make sure we don't introduce any new parasites to the United States, he said. Despite the truckloads of excrement, Armstrong said the elephants are actually eating less than elephants in many other zoos. Recent research, he said, shows that zoos were overfeeding elephants. Compared to what most people are used to seeing in zoo elephants, ours are going to look thin. That's how they should look, he said. That's how they look in the wild. Before the elephants came to Omaha, they spent several months in temporary holding areas called bomas in Swaziland. There, they transitioned to a diet made up mostly of hay with miscellaneous branches, leaves, and other foliage known as browse mixed in. In Omaha, that mix will continue. According to the Omaha Zoo Foundation, it costs $100 to feed an elephant for a day. The zoo has 6 zookeepers to help manage the elephants, some of whom moved over from other animal specialties to help out. Among their duties is, well, scooping poop. After the quarantine period, the elephant dung will be composted in the zoo's own on-site facility.
Well, there we go. Well, let's find out. No transition needed here to ask Amy's, what her advice is going to be for us. Dear Amy, my wife and I are expecting our first child, and we know we will be having a boy. I am the eldest son from my father. I was named after his father, according to tradition. The expectation is that I will name my son after my father. My father's first name is rather long, and he has gone by a nickname his entire life. I have used a nickname too. It's easier. Am I required to name my first son after my father? With the first and last name, our son will have 22 characters in his name. Honestly, I would rather give him a simple name derived from my father's name. I'd even shorten my son's last name to make it easier for him. Spelling out a long last name and then being asked, how do you pronounce that, is not a favorite pastime for me. By the way, I know that feeling. I'm worried that my father may be offended, and my siblings have been playing with his head, saying that I have to name my son after him. My wife and I have discussed this, and as parents, we will do what is best for our child. But how do I deal with the potential backlash from my siblings and my father? And it's signed Father-to-be. Well, dear Father-to-be, my major piece of advice is that if you go the traditional route, you should either choose to change/shorten your child's first name or the last name, but don't do both. You and your wife have the right to choose whatever name you want from your family, her family, or mine. Being the family's first grandchild will soften a hard-hearted relative. If you and your father both use a nickname, perhaps you can name your son that nickname as his official first name. Let your father know beforehand, but not necessarily your siblings, because really it's none of their beeswax at this point. You and your wife will have to be on the same page and resolute about this. Do your best to be in charge and good-humored about this decision. This is your child, and this is the first of many decisions you will make on his behalf. Dear Amy, my daughter is a sophomore at one of the top 10 universities in the country. 2 years ago, when she started school, she was thinking of a double major in math and Spanish. Now she has decided to quit math as a major and major in Spanish. As a matter of fact, Amy, she doesn't even know what she wants to do with her life. This is killing me because she is a smart student, and with all the time and money we are spending, she is not going to get anywhere she deserves after 4 years. She even made it onto the dean's list last year, despite the fact that she didn't like some of the courses she took. Is there any way I can help her? And it's signed, Desperate Parent. Dear Desperate, you seem determined to create and perpetuate a problem where none exists. Let's review. Your daughter is majoring in Spanish at a prestigious university. She's getting great grades. She isn't sure what she wants to do with her life. In short, your daughter is basically exactly where she should be. Did you know what you wanted to do at her age? Most people don't. Your hard-earned money is being spent on your daughter's education, and she is getting an education. Your investment should not require that she announce her life plan to you at the ripe old age of 20. My main suggestion is not for your daughter, but for you. If you pressure her and degrade her choices, she may find a way to repay your generosity by dropping out and or landing back home after graduation with no discernible plans or priorities. In short, stop helping. And finally, dear Amy, Chair Chick uses a wheelchair and doesn't like it when people offer to pray for her. Well, I am a pastor who has used a wheelchair for the past 13 years. I too have had well-meaning people offer to pray for me, and other not so well-meaning people imply that perhaps I hadn't prayed hard enough or that my faith wasn't strong enough. To all I respond, can't you see my wings? My wheelchair has been a gift. With it, I am able to leave my house and rejoin the world. We are all an accident or a diagnosis away from a wheelchair. Signed, Reverend D. Amy's response, Dear D, amen to that.
Thank you. The headline says, Do white doctors understand black patients' pain? And the subheadline says, Study suggests they don't, and such bias could lead to treatment differences. This is an article that was originally in the Washington Post. African Americans are routinely undertreated for their pain compared with whites, according to research. A study reported Monday sheds some disturbing light on why that may be. Researchers at the University of Virginia quizzed white medical students and residents to see how many believed inaccurate and at times fantastical differences about the two races. For example, that blacks have less sensitive nerve endings than whites, or that black people's blood coagulates more quickly. They found that fully half of those quizzed thought that at least one of the false statements was possibly, probably, or definitely true. Moreover, those who held false beliefs often rated black patients' pain as lower than that of white patients and made less appropriate recommendations about treatment. The research, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, could help illuminate one of the most vexing problems in pain treatment today, that whites are more likely than blacks to be prescribed strong pain medications for equivalent ailments. A 2000 study by Emory University found that at hospital emergency department in Atlanta, 74% of white patients with bone fractures received painkillers, compared with 50% of black patients. Similarly, a study last year found that black children with appendicitis were less likely to receive pain medication than their white counterparts. And a 2007 study found that doctors were more likely to underestimate the pain of black patients compared with other patients. Researchers who study health disparities have said unconscious stereotypes about African Americans probably contribute to this problem, as well as physicians' difficulty empathizing with patients whose experiences differ from theirs. The University of Virginia study supports arguments that physician bias is a factor. Its research had two parts. One looked at a random sample of 92 whites from across the country. The second queried 222 white medical students and residents at the university and elsewhere. In both cases, participants were given a series of statements that contained accurate or inaccurate information about the biological differences between blacks and whites. We were expecting some endorsement of the false beliefs, said Kelly Hoffman, a University of Virginia doctoral candidate in psychology who led the study. But she said researchers were surprised that so many in the group with medical training endorsed the false beliefs, some of which she called more outlandish. For example, 58% of the study's general group said they believe that black skin is thicker than whites. About 40% of first and second year medical students also thought this was true, as did 25% of residents. Also surprising was that so many of the students and new physicians did not believe true statements about biological differences between races, Hoffman said. For example, only half of residents knew that whites are less susceptible to heart disease than blacks. The group was given one more test. After reading case studies of 2 patients in pain, one white and one black, the students and physicians were asked to rate each individual's pain and make treatment recommendations. The researchers then compared the results with recommendations from 10 experienced physicians who analyzed the case studies without any racial information included. What we found is those who endorsed more of those false beliefs showed more bias and were less accurate in their treatment recommendations, Hoffman said.
Well, it's been 3 years now since 10-year-old Christian Bucks thought his family was moving to Germany for his dad's job, and his mom showed him brochures about his potential new schools. He would be the new kid there, the one without anyone to play with in the schoolyard. He was just in first grade then, but he knew what loneliness on the playground looked like. He had seen it at his own elementary school in York, Pennsylvania. But one German school he and his mom looked at had a solution for this. It was called a buddy bench. And if a child was sitting on it alone, it was a signal to the other kids to ask him or her to play. Christian's family never did move to Germany, but the little boy is credited with introducing buddy benches to America. He brought the idea to his principal, Matthew Miller, and the two immediately set out to install a buddy bench at Round Town Elementary. Their project was covered by the local newspaper and went viral. Since then, the two have been featured in national news and gave a joint TED Talk in February 2014. Christian has been invited to schools as far away as Los Angeles and Honolulu. There are an estimated 2,000 schools with benches across the United States now and in about a dozen other countries, Miller said. I didn't like to see kids lonely at recess when everyone is just playing with their friends, Christian said in a phone interview. Christian's mom, Allison Bucks, said her son had always been empathetic. He's always looking out for the person who might need a little help, she said. For a kid with no one to play with, there may be no lonelier place than the school playground. And kids with an established group of friends may not think to seek out those who feel excluded. Loneliness among young children is very common. One 2004 study in London found that 80% of the kids between 8 and 10 years who were interviewed described being lonely at some point at school. It's also common for children to go off by themselves when they're feeling sad. And what they really need is for someone to notice. The benches give children a safe, non-judgmental place to retreat. Once a child is asked off the bench to come play, the hope is that they'll have the confidence to go play with their new friends again the next day. Emails poured in from all over when Christian's buddy bench story was picked up by the Today Show and the Huffington Post in late 2013. One second grader from Los Angeles wrote to Miller, I have had a hard time making friends on the playground, so I am going to use buddy bench at our school. Like Christian, he met with his principal and his school installed one. Christian and his mom flew across the country for its unveiling. About a week after Christian's buddy bench story went viral, the mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary in Newtown, Connecticut happened. As the principal of an elementary school, Miller was devastated. The buddy bench and the inspiration it spurred was a timely uplift. It was one little boy's idea and it really resonated with people, Miller said. It gave me hope at a time when I was feeling really down and out after what had happened. And here comes Christian with this idea, and I thought, we're going to be okay. In fact, in February 2014, Christian and Miller visited Newtown, where Christian was awarded the Charlotte Bacon Act of Kindness Award, named after one of the little girls who was killed. There are still new buddy benches popping up on school playgrounds around the globe. Christian says amazing things happen when you share your hopes and dreams, and you may end up helping more people than you can ever imagine. Deb?
Thanks, Don. I'm going to turn now to business and markets because I'm out of living news.
Okay.
There's a question and answer article here on the front page of the money section. The headline says, "It's possible but unlikely offshore accounts are legit." This letter from the Associated Press in Tokyo, not a letter, an article. Privacy has a price. For the super wealthy, it also can have a big payoff. The use of offshore accounts and favorable laws in certain countries can allow rich individuals and families to keep their money hidden from the eyes of tax authorities, regulators, and others in their home country. Here's a look at how offshore accounts are used, both legally and illegally, in the wake of an investigation by an international coalition of media outlets that shows how the rich and powerful use banks, law firms, trusts, and offshore shell companies to hide their assets. Question: what are these accounts? They are bank accounts or trusts established in a foreign country that take advantage of local banking and corporate laws to help hide the true identity of the owner of the money or other assets in the accounts. Often the person establishes a so-called shell company which lacks any real operations and exists mainly on paper. The company is listed as the official owner of the trust or account. That allows the wealthy person to control the account indirectly through the company and makes it harder for authorities to link the money to the individual. While shell companies and offshore accounts aren't illegal by themselves, they can be used to help avoid taxes, facilitate money laundering, and conceal corruption. Next question: where are offshore accounts held? Those looking to hide assets establish accounts in countries such as Panama, the Cayman Islands, and Bermuda, where the banking laws are designed to vigorously protect account owners' identities. There also are havens such as the Isle of Man off Britain, Macau off China, and the Cook Islands in the South Pacific. Question: are there legitimate reasons for these arrangements? Answer: it's possible, but don't bank on it, says Jimmy Gurul, a former Assistant U.S. Attorney General and Undersecretary for Enforcement at the Treasury Department. The likelihood is strong that the entity has no commercial or legitimate purpose, said Gurul, who teaches law at Notre Dame. The Caymans, for example, has a well-deserved reputation for being a money laundering and tax evasion haven. Still, wealthy people who live in countries with unstable political situations, high levels of corruption, or criminal activity such as kidnapping or extortion could use offshore accounts and the secrecy they provide for protection and not necessarily to avoid taxes. Question: how are offshore accounts used illegally? The anonymity afforded by shell companies and offshore accounts allows them to be used by terrorists and other international criminals to hide and move money. They're an ideal vehicle for people who want to keep their transactions secret to escape law enforcement or civil liability, said Jack Bloom, a Washington attorney and an expert on financial crime and international tax evasion. Terrorist groups' use of shadowy financial networks has been scrutinized by law enforcement agencies, and the U.S. government has applied sanctions to a number of groups. Here's the last question: how are governments cracking down? Congress passed a law in 2010 called the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act to target U.S. taxpayers who may be hiding money in foreign accounts. The leaders of the Group of 20, representing 80% of the global economy, have recently worked to get its members to adopt stricter reporting requirements to prevent secret dealings. Anti-corruption advocates say legal standards have improved but are not tough enough. On Monday, Angel Gurria, the Secretary General of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is working with the G20 to restrict the use of shell companies, called on Panama to put its house in order. It was a leak of 11.5 million documents from a Panamanian law firm that specializes in creating shell companies that led to revelations of widespread use of these companies and accounts to avoid taxes.
Well, Nebraska's current minimum wage, which went into effect January 1, is $9 an hour. Now, I'm sure you've heard that California and New York are going to be moving up to $15. But for now, in Nebraska, there doesn't appear to be any effort to further increase it. In Iowa, an effort appears stalled. Nebraska lawmakers, for one, didn't introduce any bills this year that would have raised the state's general minimum wage, according to a search of the bills introduced in the legislature this session. State Senator Matt Hansen of Lincoln did introduce a measure, Legislative Bill 1089, that proposed changing the minimum wage for persons compensated compensated by way of gratuities, mostly restaurant employees who work for the minimum wage of $2.13 an hour, who also make tips. But that bill was indefinitely postponed. Jeff Sheldon, a spokesman for Nebraska Appleseed, a nonprofit that advocates on behalf of low-income residents, said the group is not aware of any current efforts to further increase Nebraska's minimum wage beyond the successful ballot initiative of November 2014. That's when Nebraska voters passed a minimum wage ballot measure, a two-step process that raised the state's $7.25 minimum wage to $8 an hour on January 1, 2015, and $9 an hour at the beginning of this year. The state minimum wage had been $7.25 for 6 years. In Iowa, the current minimum is $7.25 an hour, the same as the federal minimum. This year, House lawmakers in the Hawkeye State introduced legislation to raise the state's minimum wage to $8.75 an hour on July 1 of this year, to $10.50 an hour on January 1, 2017, and $12 an hour on July 1, 2017. The proposal was sent to the Labor Committee on February 4, but since then no action has been taken, and Iowa's current legislative session is scheduled to conclude May 1. Raising the minimum wage typically will affect the economy in one of three ways, or in a combination of those ways, said Diana Thomas, economics professor at Creighton University in Omaha. Implementing a higher minimum wage will either raise prices for consumers or reduce employment or reduce the bottom lines for businesses, Thomas said. For example, Thomas said the tuition at her daughter's daycare center increased this year. The tuition hike was accompanied by a letter that said the center raised prices to cover the increased labor costs created by the state minimum wage requirement. I'm not upset about that, said Thomas, who has researched the topic. Higher wages should allow them to hire more qualified staff. But the downside is that lower income families may not be able to afford the added tuition, she said. Others maintain that raising the minimum wage won't raise prices across the entire economy. Instead, businesses will accept less profit to remain competitive, according to former U.S. Secretary of Labor Robert Reich. Furthermore, those minimum wage workers will have more money to spend, pumping more into the economy as a whole. Reich wrote on his blog calling for raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Deb?
Thanks. Here's one last business story. Bolus, Nebraska. Gene Whitefoot has been in the grocery business in Bolus since February 8th, 1941. 75 years later, he still works 6 days a week. I've never had another job, said Whitefoot, 86. He's also never lived anywhere but Bolus in Howard County. He has lived his entire life in a 2-block area. That's being in a rut, I would say, he said, smiling. Whitefoot started working at the store when he was 11. He's been the sole owner of the business since 1992, when it became known as Whitefoot Market. His son Wayne is in charge of Whitefoot Catering, which operates out of the same building. That business caters events over a wide area. Last fall, Whitefoot Catering handled 9 weddings in one day. 3 other groups picked up their meals at the store. If not for the catering business, the grocery store wouldn't be around. Small stores are going by the wayside, Whitefoot said. Whitefoot gets to work at 7:30 a.m. and goes home at 6 p.m. He doesn't work Sundays and Wednesday afternoons. For many years, Whitefoot Market has given free candy to kids. Last May, Whitefoot's right knee was replaced. The operation was done by Dr. Scott Franson, who was born in Bolus. Whitefoot jokes, I gave him suckers and he gave me a knee. Whitefoot remembers when area farmers came into town every Thursday night. A free movie would be shown outside for the kids. Farmers brought in their eggs and cream and got groceries in exchange. Neighbors would visit with neighbors. On those nights, the grocery store sometimes stayed open until 1 a.m. When Whitefoot was very young, Bolus had 3 grocery stores, a hardware store, a meat market, 2 elevators, 2 banks, and 2 bars. In a town of 320 people, 6 places had gas pumps. Bolus, which is now home to 185 people, is still doing all right. It has a steakhouse, filling station, bank, filling station, the bank, and fertilizer plant. His uncle Andy Jensen asked Whitefoot to work at the store when Whitefoot was a youngster. The business was started by Andy Jensen's father, Pete, in 1896. After Whitefoot got married in 1948, Andy Jensen asked him what he planned to do. He said he'd probably work a few more months at the store and then move on. Well, I was in 1948 and I'm still here, Whitefoot said. He and Kermit Erickson bought the business in 1970. Whitefoot bought out Erickson in 1992. Whitefoot and his wife Alma had 3 kids. Wayne lives above the store. Mike lives in Grand Island. Daughter Velda lives in Kearney. Alma died in 1999. Whitefoot said he doesn't want to retire because he's already doing what he likes to do. He will continue to work as long as he feels he's helping and is not in the way. He's comfortable in the place he's worked since before Pearl Harbor. I know what I'm doing most of the time, he says. Some of them around here don't think I do, but I do.
Thank you, Deb. Well, on to sports. And you probably have heard, and if not, let me fill you in. Villanova defeated North Carolina last night with 1.1 second to go. Quite a wild game. And this article here is about, it's about the basketball game and the Villanova coach. Jay Wright may still be the best dressed coach in college basketball. Now he has a national championship to go with those expensive suits. Not since Jim Valvano ran around looking for someone to hug has a coach had an ending to a season like this. Chris Jenkins' three-pointer went through the net as time expired, and Villanova beat North Carolina 77-74 on Monday night, giving the Wildcats their second national championship and first since 1985. Wright joins the list of coaches with one title, something that seemed far from his grasp the last few years. The Wildcats had great regular seasons, but they couldn't get to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. Now they are on top, and it's time for people to recognize that Wright, who has just completed his 15th season at Villanova and who reached the Final Four in 2009, is no longer just a regular season coach with Big East titles. He has a national championship. You're like a parent when you're a coach. I just couldn't be prouder, couldn't be happier to see them enjoy this and fulfill their dreams, he said. That's what it's all about for a coach, just to see their eyes, to see their satisfaction, their enjoyment. There's no better feeling in the world for a coach or a parent. Roy Williams, the coach whose season ended when Jenkins' shot went through, had a chance to become just the 6th man to win 3 national championships. Instead, he will remain tied with his mentor and former boss, Dean Smith, with 2 titles. It was a heartbreaker for Williams, who has had his heart broken in other ways in the past 18 months, losing Smith and longtime Tar Heels assistant and head coach, Bill Guthridge. That coach out there on that court cutting down those nets is really proud of his team, Williams said. But I wouldn't trade my team for anybody. I just wish I could have helped them a little bit more. Marcus Page of North Carolina hit a three-pointer with 4.7 seconds to play, tying the game at 74. It was a great shot, the kind that I remembered for a long time. Wright called a timeout and put the ball in senior Ryan Arcidiacono's hands, and he got the ball up the court, turned his back to the basket, and passed it to Jenkins. Now, Wright is the most recent coach to win a title on a buzzer beater, and unlike Valvano when North Carolina State beat Houston in 1983, Wright turned and had a group hug with his assistants. Standing outside the group was Williams, waiting to congratulate his counterpart. Wright broke away and hugged Williams. One coach had his first title, the other 4.7 seconds from a third. That was one of the great college basketball games we've ever been a part of, Wright said. We didn't just beat a great team, but a great program, classy program. And before they determined that shot was good, Roy came right up to me and said, I'm really disappointed for our guys. It was a great game, but I'm really happy for you. I know he meant that. Williams had to go in and face his team. You know, I'm not very good because I can't take away the hurt, Williams said, of talking to his team in the locker room right after the game. I'm not very good because I can't change that. I told them I loved them. I told them I wished I could have helped them more, that I appreciated them from the bottom of my heart. The difference between winning and losing in college basketball is so small. The difference in your feelings is so large. And that's the NCAA tournament. That's college basketball. The man who led Villanova to their first title 31 years ago, Raleigh Massimino, was in attendance. Wright, who was with his assistant at UNLV in the 1990s, had his arm around his former boss as he did a radio interview at courtside with former Georgetown coach John Thompson, Massimino's opponent in his championship game. Everyone in coaching has to be given a chance by somebody. You don't have internships or apprenticeships in coaching where you learn the craft. Somebody has to give you the opportunity. Then you have to spend the time. They have to spend the time with you to teach you. He did that for me, Wright said. To share this with him, our Villanova people love him. He's a magical figure. Wright, with even his gold tie clasp still in place, was still looking the part of a well-dressed basketball coach, one who will soon have a ring to match.
Thanks. This headline says Husker offense hitting its stride. With 8 starters batting at least .300, a balanced attack is leading the way for Nebraska this season. Lincoln. Nebraska's first inning at the plate breezed by without a base runner Sunday, lasting just 14 pitches. Illinois didn't enjoy that luxury again. The Huskers finished off their 9-7 series-clinching win by creating scoring opportunities, a runner reaching second base, in every inning after the first. They produced runs in 5 of their final 7 frames. 5 players had multiple hits Sunday. The 3 guys who didn't get a hit reached at least once with a walk. Of the Huskers' 36 at-bats, 22 came with a runner on base. We want to have a lineup where we don't have to rely on 1 or 2 guys at any given time, Nebraska coach Darren Erstad said the offense can come from different parts. You have to have that over the course of a season, and then if everybody's going, it will be really fun to watch. That's become a theme of late for the balanced NU attack. 8 regular starters are batting .300 or better. The Huskers' leadoff guy, Ryan Bolt, is one of the top college prospects in the country. Their cleanup man, Scott Schreiber, ranks 3rd in the Big Ten with 7 home runs. Their 9-hole hitter, Steven Ravelis, ranks 5th on the team with 17 RBIs. It was Bolt whose 2 home runs led Nebraska to a win over Creighton last week. Ravelis scored the tying run in a comeback victory against the Illini on Saturday. Schreiber tied Sunday's game with a no-doubt blast. Scott, with just 1 swing of the bat, hits a 2-run home run, and we're back in it at 6-6, senior reliever Jeff Chestnut said. And that's what we feel like we can do at any point in the game, because 1 through 9, we're pretty tough to get out. That's a comforting feeling for Nebraska, which is still working to find consistency on defense and continues to plead its pitchers to throw more strikes. It's an unfamiliar blueprint for the Huskers, who've recently asked their batting order just for timely hits while pitchers and fielders limit the opponent. Erstad said Sunday that he still expects to see improvement on the mound and in the field. NU ended last season ranked 24th naturally with a 3.12 earned run average and 5th with a .979 fielding percentage. I feel very strongly that we have better baseball in front of us, Erstad said. The offense will lead the way for now, though. Nebraska hosts Kansas State 12-17 on Tuesday before traveling to Werner Park for a 6:30 p.m. game Wednesday against the University of Nebraska at Omaha, 15-13. Both teams have an earned run average over 5. The Huskers, 19-8, rank 2nd in the Big Ten at 6.7 runs scored per game, 1st in slugging percentage, and 3rd in on-base percentage. They finished with a double-digit hit in total in 8 of their last 9 games. And they can maintain this pace, Schreiber said. He said they're as confident as ever, but it will require constant focus. We've just got to stick to our approach, he said. If we get out of that, anything can happen. Baseball's a hard game, so we've just got to stick to that approach, stay humble, and stay hungry.
Well, the ladies' basketball college basketball title is on the line tonight. And Brianna Stewart came to UConn with a lofty goal of winning 4 national championships. And the Huskies are now just 1 victory away from history. They will play former Big East foe Syracuse on Tuesday night with a chance to become the first women's team to win 4 straight Division I titles. Only UCLA, with 7 in a row from 1967 to 73, has done it on the men's side, and a UConn victory would give Coach Gino Auriemma, 11 national championships, 1 more than Bruins coach John Wooden for the most in the history of college basketball. While Stewart didn't guarantee 4 titles when she was a freshman, she did promise a victory against Syracuse. I'm not going to go and say that we're going to lose, Stewart said after the Huskies beat Oregon State in the Final Four. To end my college career, to end it with the other seniors, there was no other way that I want that to happen. Syracuse coach Quentin Hilsman wasn't planning on using the comments as extra motivation for his team. I don't think she knew who she was playing yet, he said, laughing. So what is she supposed to say? I told our fans and our crowd that we're going to win too. Now here's a few facts. UConn is 10 wins in 10 tries in title games. The coach says, I think at this time of the year, your confidence level and your ability have to mesh. There's teams maybe that come here with a lot more confidence than ability, and it catches up to you, or a lot more ability than they have confidence. So when these two things mesh, I think you have a pretty unbeatable combination. And for Syracuse has been stellar in the tournament from behind the 3-point line. The Orangemen have made 48 3-pointers so far in the NCAAs, averaging nearly 10 a game, up 1 from the regular season. They're also making 33.6% from behind the arc, up 4% from the regular season. Our goal is to make 10 threes a game, the coach said. If it takes 40 to make 10, it's 40. If it takes 50, it takes 50. And finally, one note on Husker football, yet another California coup. The prized quarterback recruit wasn't going to do anything hasty, the article says. However, Tristan Gabia has committed to the University of Nebraska to play football. He was the only uncommitted recruit among the nation's top 10 pro-style quarterbacks, according to 24/7 Sports Compost rankings. Big deal here for the Huskers, at least in public acclaim. We'll see how he works out.
Right.
Well, it's 12 o'clock, and that means our time is up. So for Don Van,
And Deb Beatty.
we're finished for this week. Have a good week, everyone.
Yes, thank you both very, very much. Thank you, Doc. And more like thank you, give it 4 times so that we can become informed. Have a great week from all of us here at the Radio Network.
Anything planned today or the rest of the week?
Yeah, probably. I don't know. I have a massage this afternoon, right away, in fact. That'll be lovely. Make me feel much better.
Yeah.
How about you?
Feeling well? Is that it?
I was doing yard work Sunday, and I had this yard cart thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm holding the handle, and I was going to park it because I picked up everything I'd raked up, and I kind of pushed it up onto the sidewalk, and it tipped, and I'm holding the handle, and it fell down, and I fell down right into it, my whole head right in the. So I'm a little sore.
I was messing around too outside, and then I went to try to hit golf balls on Sunday afternoon. And I was like,